Welcome to the first in 3 videos that walk through a mock paper for the AQA Germany Democracy and Dictatorship Unit. In this video, we will focus on the 3 interpretation questions. These require you to first consider how and why the 2 interpretations are different before evaluating which you find most convincing. Question 1 asks, how does interpretation B differ from interpretation A about opposition to Hitler? It asks you to explain your answer based on what it says in the interpretations. The phrase, "what it says," is an important indicator of how to answer the question. It is also important to remember that it is only worth 4 marks, so aim to write a maximum of 4 questions. Let's have a look at what it says in the interpretations. For this, we need to ignore the provenance at the top of each interpretation. I will give you 1 minute to read both interpretations and highlight something for each that relates to opposition to Hitler. For interpretation A, I have chosen the mini-quote "ridiculous race theories" because it shows that the author was not indoctrinated by Nazi ideology. I have also highlighted the phrase "our Christian faith" as this explains the reason why he did not support Hitler and his ideas. For interpretation B, I have highlighted the phrase "despised the motives" because this shows how the author reacted when hearing about the July bomb plot, which was an attempt on Hitler's life. It therefore stands in clear contrast to the opinion shown in interpretation A. In this answer, I have abbreviated the word interpretation to simply int. This can save you valuable seconds in the exam. I have also included short and embedded quotes, again to save time. The most important thing to do is identify how the interpretations differ in relation to the topic of the question, and then to briefly explain this difference. If you spend more than 4 minutes writing your answer, you have spent too long. Let's now examine the second question. Again, this is only worth 4 marks. The question asks, why might the authors of interpretations A and B have a different interpretation about opposition to Hitler? This time it says that you should use both the interpretations and contextual knowledge. Since it is asking why they are different, you are best discussing the provenance and linking this to your wider understanding of the topic. I will now give you 1 minute to read the provenance of both sources and highlight something that you believe is important. For interpretation A, I believe it is very important to highlight that he was involved in a group that tried to assassinate Hitler. This means he was passionate in his opposition, and from my wider understanding I know that very few were brave enough to make a direct attempt at removing Hitler from power. Furthermore, he became a Christian minister after the war. This means his religious beliefs helped to form his opinion of Hitler. For interpretation B, I have highlighted how she was a member of the League of German Maidens, or BDM. This is important because we know that the youth groups of Nazi Germany were responsible for the indoctrination of young people. Furthermore, she became the head of publicity for the BDM, meaning she became responsible for distributing Nazi propaganda, which contained their ideology. For my answer, I have written the following. The authors differ, because interpretation B followed Hitler's ideology, whilst interpretation A was a Christian, so was not indoctrinated into the regime. Interpretation B became a senior member of the German League of Maidens, so not only followed Hitler, but also tried to convert others to Nazi ideology. In contrast, interpretation A was part of a group that tried to assassinate Hitler, and so must have felt passionately opposed to his ideology, especially since very few were brave enough to take action against the regime. This answer clearly identifies why the two authors had different views and also provides brief contextual knowledge. It is important to not go overboard with the amount of own knowledge in this question. You need to reserve important points for question 3. Let's now examine the third question, which interpretation gives the more convincing opinion about opposition to Hitler. This question is worth 8 marks, and for this you need to write 2 paragraphs, one for each interpretation. There are 2 very important phrases in this question. The first is the phrase more convincing. This requires you to arrive at a judgment. However, it does not mean that you need to treat one interpretation in a wholly positive way and the other in a wholly negative way. Secondly, the phrase what it says in the interpretations. Many candidates wish to discuss the provenance and link that to author bias. It is okay to discuss provenance, but only if linked to own knowledge. If the discussion is entirely based on author bias, then it is hard to achieve marks. The easiest way to gain the marks is to cross-examine what it says in the interpretation with your wider understanding and knowledge. Now spend 1 minute rereading what it says in the interpretations and considering how you could link it to contextual knowledge. Top tip: if you are not sure about a specific reference, such as the White Rose Group, instead focus on things you have learnt about and feel confident to talk about. From interpretation A, I have chosen the quote ridiculous race theories. This is because this can be used to discuss indoctrination about the Aryan race, including how children like the author of interpretation B was taught the subject of eugenics or race studies as part of their school curriculum. I have also chosen to discuss interpretation A's Christian faith. This is because Bible teachings go against Nazi ideology, and this then explains the motives of the author to oppose Hitler. However, I know that not all Christians objected to Hitler, so this is something I can explore in my answer. Christians were not the only social group who opposed Hitler. Opposition came from a range of different social groups. I am going to use the provenance of interpretation B, because it is such a fundamental part of the author's interpretation. The fact she joined the BDM in her teens means she will have been heavily exposed to Nazi propaganda, and this would have fashioned her beliefs about Hitler. I could also use this as a springboard to discuss the activities of youth groups. Furthermore, her loyalty to the BDM explains why she describes the author of Interpretation A and his co-conspirators as criminals or madmen. She simply could not understand why anyone would wish to oppose the regime. In this sense, she represented many from the younger generation who aspired to build the Third Reich for Hitler. Let's now examine my answer. I have decided to discuss Interpretation B first, because that is the one I believe to be most convincing. My answer reads, Interpretation B provides the more convincing view since her view was shared among ordinary people. As a member of the German League of Maidens, Interpretation B would have received indoctrination in the form of fun sporting activities, to her teacher, that she was part of a perfect Aryan race. This means she would have agreed with what Interpretation A calls ridiculous race theories, such as Jews and Slavs being Untermensch, or inferior. I know that many young Germans attended youth groups, and they were also taught race studies, or eugenics, as part of the school curriculum. This is why a large majority of Germans, especially young people, believed that opponents to Hitler were criminals or madmen. In this answer, I have focused in on the experience that Interpretation B would have received and why this informed her opinions. I have shown contextual knowledge, including key terms like eugenics and Untermensch, to clearly signpost that my opinion goes beyond what is written in the interpretation. I have then made sure to link it back to the question, relating it to opposition to Hitler, by saying that many other young people also believed the opponents to Hitler were criminals or madmen. Let's now examine my second paragraph on Interpretation A. I have written Interpretation A provides a convincing perspective for those who opposed Hitler for religious or ideological reasons. When he states that his opposition was based on his Christian faith, he refers to how some Christians chose to attend underground services, such as the members of the confessional church. They believed the Nazi teachings of prejudice and intolerance contradicted Jesus' teachings from the Sermon on the Mount, such as "Blessed be the meek." However, only a minority of Christians acted out of conscience. The others attended the Reich Church, which was approved by the Nazi state and manipulated Bible teachings. This is why I believe Interpretation B is more convincing, since she represents the majority of people who acted as bystanders and ignored the horrific elements of the Nazi regime. This paragraph shows a nuanced judgment since it explains why and how some Christians opposed Hitler, but then provides a counterargument using my understanding of the Reich Church to explain how many German people remained silent. It does not matter which interpretation you find more convincing, so long as your answer is fully justified with evidence to support the answer. Note how in this answer, I have not referred to the White Rose Group or July bomb plotters. Whilst it is important to know about these two opposition groups, you can do a sneaky side step in these interpretation questions and focus on topics you know you can discuss with confidence. Thank you for watching. Tune in to the next walkthrough in this series to learn how to answer the 4-mark describe question and the 8-mark social impact question for the AQA Germany paper.